Hello, and welcome to another episode of Sitting Ovation, a podcast about who the interesting people who work in theater are, what they do, and why they do it. We're your hosts, Bailey Sheehan,
Elizabeth Miller,
and Matt Ferragasso.
We'd like to welcome you to our show, but before we get started, we'd like to take this opportunity to respectfully acknowledge that we are hosting this podcast from the traditional lands of the Lenni Lenape people, and we pay our respects to elders both past and present.
Today, you'll be getting to know Trevor Flacco. Who is he? What does he do? Why does he do it? I'll kick us off with our first question to our guest.
Maybe
if I can figure out the music thing. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for hanging out with us today. How'd you get started in theater?
I was very fortunate and very blessed to be.
Blessed.
Yes, hashtag blessed. I hate using hashtags, but already Bailey's forcing me to use hashtags, so thanks for that. But I was at a very young age exposed to theater. Theater kind of ran in my family. We always had musicals playing in the house on the CD player. And my grandfather, I think it all really kind of started with him. He worked in New York City and loved working in New York City. And his Christmas gifts, him and my grandma, his Christmas gift to the grandkids every year was to take us to see a show in New York. And the first show I think that I remember seeing professionally was a show called Rafferty Rescues the Moon, which I think it was a TYA show. And I think it was off Broadway because the theater was tiny. But that was the first show that he took us all to see. And then every year after that, we'd go see like one of the big musicals that were happening that year. He ended up racking up a lot of debt because he got us good tickets. And we didn't realize that until after he had passed. But he really spoiled us and made sure that we had a good exposure.
And there was a lot of you. There was a lot of grandkids, right?
There were 10 of us total, but he would take us, because managing 10 grandkids in New York City sounds like a freaking nightmare. So he would take us in shifts. I was part of the oldest group. It was me, my brother, and my older cousin. And we would go see shows over Black Friday weekend. And then he would take the next youngest kids and the youngest group to go see different shows, because it was also about making sure things were age appropriate. I mean, being the youngest.
Was it though?
Was it age appropriate?
You were the youngest of the oldest. Okay.
I was the youngest of the oldest. So when Avenue Q was coming out, they were like, "Oh, it's a show with puppets in it. This will be great for the kids." And it maybe has some like language in it, but big deal. The kids will get exposed to that. But then me not knowing, I didn't really understand what was happening, because I probably saw Avenue Q when I was way too young before I understood what a lot of the content from the show was. Try to keep it PG here. But
why?
It was,
we don't.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about that.
I guess that's fair. So, not knowing what the puppets were doing when they were wrestling. Yes.
The Bad Idea Bears. They were my favorite part of that show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that, right? But still, putting Avenue Q aside, almost every big musical that was coming out through the late 90s and into the 2000s, I got a chance to see either with my grandparents or also on school trips. We had the ability to do fundraisers, and we could see shows. So throughout my young life, and theater's kind of always been a part of it. Additionally, sorry, I remembered another part to that answer.
Yeah, please go.
More than my grandparents too, my parents as well. Even though they didn't start dating until after they were in high school, while they were in high school, my mom was involved in working backstage, and my dad he played Judd Fry in Oklahoma, and both of them were raised in the arts, and they definitely translated it through and supported me and my brother in our artistic endeavors through elementary school, junior high, high school, college, and now as adults. I've always been really, really supportive of our pursuit of our arts careers.
So is that partially what led you to work in the arts, or what made you want to go into the arts? Was it all that great exposure?
I think it was definitely part of it, for sure. I think that having access to it, and also, like, my brother and I both loved it, and I had a tendency to kind of follow in his footsteps a lot when I was young. And I ended up doing as much of the shows as I could, and because all the students could audition to be in, but there weren't as many students who were helping with doing things backstage. But sometimes they asked for parent volunteers, and my parents would, since they liked being involved in our activities, would volunteer to come and help with sets and come and help with costumes and help with organizing and wrangling all of the kids. By association, we would go in on the weekends as well to help with scenery, and it became something that became more and more common. So by the time high school rolled around, I was doing scenery just as much as I was performing. And it was my senior year that I was in the musical. We were doing South Pacific, and I was playing Emile DeBeck. And at the time, I was kind of torn between whether I'd go into a music career or a theater career. But there was one moment on stage during one of the performances that I was like, I want to do theater as a career.
Let me ask you a question. We can shift a little bit. Your mom is a technician.
Well, not anymore, but when she was in high school, she definitely opened the main curtain once or twice.
That sounds like an innuendo.
I was like, what?
I never would have.
Just me? Okay.
That was you. That was you.
My mom opened the main curtain once or twice, and I skipped.
Oh, that does sound really weird now that you say it like that.
Sorry.
I wasn't sure if because you said your father was an actor, your mother was a technician
and a singer too. My dad, very musical.
So your mother wasn't she wasn't a carpenter like you are.
No, but my dad, he taught tech ed for a while. He actually did teach wood shop rather, in middle school and elementary school for a portion of his life. So I think that wanting to build things comes from my dad, but my organization definitely comes from my mom. I know that there is a running saying in this podcast series that stage management is hard.
Fact.
But my mom is the queen of spreadsheets and keeping people organized, and that's kind of what she does. She works in real estate, and that's what a lot of what she does is keeping people on track and organized and managing schedules. And if she ever did pursue a career in the arts, I think she'd be an awesome stage manager.
Well, tell her to come take my class.
Maybe I will.
Let's do it.
But I also know that she would always, like, between the both of them, but more her, was always like, we need to be early for things. We would be like, why are we so early? But she would be like, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. You want to be on time. That's why you're early.
Yeah. And it isn't, I don't think it's because of theatrical teaching, which is, it's a very common phrase. Like, if you're early, you're on time, you're late, and late is unacceptable, right? But I don't know if she got that from theater. I just think that's a way that she was raised, and it's something that she translated to us. And I like to think that I follow.
I heard the same saying at a basketball camp. So I think
I think it's probably a relatively common thing for people who want to be making sure that things are running smoothly and staying organized.
Well, you were late to this podcast, Trevor. So what does that say about you?
I wasn't sure if I should have brought that up or not. But yes, I was late to this recording session. And I think, with us not having to like walk to meetings, you're like, oh, I can go. I don't need to worry about walking to my meeting. The time will just hit, and that'll just end this meeting and go into the next one. But then when you're not paying attention to the time and caught up in the conversation. Anyway, I'm rambling. So anyway, bit of a tangent. Sorry. What's the next question? And did I answer the last one?
I have a follow-up.
Okay.
You kind of alluded to this moment on stage when you knew that it was going to be this, but you didn't tell me what that was.
I guess that's because the thing is
that it leave me in suspense?
Okay. Emile DeBeck, he sings a couple of songs in the show, and then there's one at the end when he's singing a song called This Nearly Was Mine. And it's a beautiful song about lost love, and one of the music teacher really liked having these, we would rent these movers, and he would always have this signature sign where he would like blind the audience with his movers, and he thought that song, the end of that song, was the appropriate time. So I knew that it was like a special moment, and I actually cried on stage, which had never happened for me before. And the reason why I didn't want to necessarily go into it is because it was when I was thinking that I'd be pursuing a career as an actor. And it's not like that's something that's completely off the table for me, but since going to college and transitioning from college to graduate school, and then what the jobs that graduate school has gotten me, I've been performing a lot less. And in some respects I miss it. But that's kind of that moment as Emile DeBeck when I cried on stage for the first time. I don't know why I just laughed at it. It was kind of meant to be like an oh boo-hoo. I don't know. I'm kind of self-deprecating here, like I do. But that was Elizabeth. To answer your follow-up, it was that moment that I felt connected, where I felt the most connected to theater that I ever had felt. And And that's when I decided to, and that's why I decided to make theater my major when I went to school.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I have a degree in acting and I never get on stage. And Matt gets on stage more than both of us combined.
I was going to say the opportunity isn't lost, but I also can't speak for your position.
Yeah. So maybe we should just add that to our list at the commune. Like we'll put on little shows,
I'm in.
cast ourselves in shows.
So you had just talked about going to grad school, and we have little baby Trevor crying while performing South Pacific, and now we have adult Trevor, the man, as as the TD in our shop. So how did you go from a senior in high school as a performer to where you are now? What was that path for you?
Yeah. While that moment as an actor is what launched me to decide to make theater a career, I was also that year elected as the technical coordinator as a student officer for the theater company, the student theater company. And I always had my foot in both scenery, as far as construction was concerned, and performing. So when I was looking at schools, I went to Temple because I knew Temple I would be able to get a couple classes in both, but I decided I could focus more of my classes on acting and then maybe eventually get a work study job as a carpenter in the scene shop, which is exactly what happened. So I took all my classes through acting and got a couple of technical classes, but then got the exposure that I liked through the work. And then I auditioned for ERDAs, which is it's I don't know if you want to call it a conference. It's a weekend of auditions where you're auditioning for a bunch of different grad schools, because I knew that I wanted to teach, and I knew that if I wanted to teach in college, that I would need to go to grad school. So acting didn't necessarily ERDAs for me, acting wise. I didn't get as many callbacks as I had hoped and ended up not getting accepted to any programs. But I was encouraged to apply for an internship at Cape May Stage as a carpenter, and ended up receiving that, and then ended up meeting a lot of people from Utah State University, including the head of the MFA program, a recent MFA graduate, and a current undergrad, all who were working in that shop on those summer shows. And halfway through the summer, in July, I was approached by the head of the program, who was the set designer for the summer, and he said, "Hey, do you want to come get an MFA in set design?" And I said, "I've built scenery. I've never designed scenery. And I don't have much of a portfolio." It's like, "Well, that's not a problem. We'll teach you. I see that you have a positive attitude, strong work ethic, a strong work ethic." Sorry.
Bad vocab, but that's okay. No.
Yeah.
And I'll say that we'll cut it, but we all know that I won't.
And problem solving ability, and that's enough to make for the bare bones of a decent set designer, or at least that's what he told me. So I decided to be like, "Yeah, I'll move to Utah. I'll go for 3 years and get an MFA." Because again, it was more about the teaching for me than whether or not it was in performance or in design and production. When you go to Utah State, they have you, as in an MFA, you have a couple of design areas that you can choose from as your primary, but then you also have to choose a secondary design area or a secondary production area to help make you well-rounded. So I chose set design as my primary focus and then technical direction as my secondary focus. And after 3 years of doing as much of that as I could, I got a job as a resident set designer and technical director at a wonderful little theater in California called the Great American Melodrama. While I was there, I was kind of a one-man scene shop.
It's jumping the gun, Trevor. You're jumping the gun. I have more questions about your schooling.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You skip to our next question.
My bad.
So were there a lot of other MFAs at this school? Were there a lot of other set designers there? Were you like lost in the sea of all these very experienced set designers?
Unfortunately not. I mean, I had 2 great set design professors, but there were 6 MFA students total. And the set designer that I had met at Cape May Stage, who had just graduated, was the last set designer that they had. In the following 2 years were comprised of lighting designers and costume designers. So there was a bit of a curve for me to be learning. Definitely a lot of all-nighters and emotional times through graduate school, like I think everyone experiences it to a certain degree. But I was kind of learning set design from my set design professors and my technical director professor Because after me, there were a couple of set designers that came. No, not a couple, just one, who ended up becoming one of my really good friends. That I felt like, oh, finally somebody that I can mentor as a set designer. It was really exciting, and I liked working with the undergrads, but I was also learning along with them. It was a small program, and I did a lot of learning on the fly, like I still do. But doing my best to make it work. Yeah,
What brought you to Lehigh?
I really enjoyed teaching as a graduate student, but it wasn't me as a professor. After that job, after a year at the Melodrama in California, I went back to Utah State because there was a visiting professor as a technical director position. And I really, really enjoyed teaching. I applied to have my position renewed, and they ended up going with someone with more experience because I am still very, very early in my career. And I was looking for more set design jobs, teaching, more technical direction jobs teaching, and this one came up at Lehigh University, which Lehigh is very close to where I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania. So an opportunity to return to my roots seemed like a really, really awesome opportunity. And so far has proven through the challenges of the job and the triumphs of the job has been a good move so far. I'm enjoying my job here. I've been here for a year and a half now. So I basically, what brought me to Lehigh is I saw the job, I applied for it, and I got it.
So what is that job?
So here at Lehigh, I am the technical director and production manager for the Department of Theater. I'm also an adjunct professor who teaches 1 or 2 classes, sometimes 3, depending on student interest.
What's a TD? What does a TD do?
I was about to say what it does, but I'm like, wait, should I wait for someone to ask me, or because I ramble? Listening to all the sitting Ovation episodes ahead of time, I'm like, I know what questions they're going to ask, so I'm like kind of preemptively answering them. But I'm like, I'm doing way too much talking.
It's all about you today, Trevor. It's not way too much talking.
What was your question, Bailey?
As a technical director, for those who don't know theater, what does a technical director do?
A technical director could do a lot of different things depending on the setting that you're in, as far as if you're working for a professional regional company or at a university or even at a high school or on Broadway. It kind of depends where you are. But here, specifically at Lehigh, as a technical director, I oversee the construction and implementation of the sets that we build for the Department of Theater shows. So that could include meeting with designers, meeting with the set designer to make sure that it is achievable with the resources that we have, whether it's time or money or space, making sure that I can communicate what the needs of the space are to the set designers to make sure that we're helping the set designer serve the story. It also could mean creating technical drawings or blueprints in conjunction with Matt, the wonderful assistant technical director that I have, to make sure that we have enough material or need to purchase material to build the sets. And then also communicating scheduling of the build process to make sure that set pieces are being built and then painted on time by our wonderful scenic charge, Bailey Sheehan.
That's me. Where's the angel sound? Do we have like an angel sound effect? Ah.
I think one can be added, right? I don't know how much editing is done in post. But yes, every plug I give to the 3 hosts, I think that there should be an angel sound. I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Okay.
We'll add it in post.
Sure. But so that's kind of what I do. And then I also am in the shop with the students and Matt and Bailey, building and dressing and implementing the scenery, hopefully on time before first tech. So that covers the technical director part of my job. My production management part of my job has to do with overall budgeting for the Department of Theater needs when it comes to scenery and lighting and sound. And it also involves scheduling and working with the stage managers to make sure that all members of the production team are getting what they need. So sometimes in my job, I'll be working with Elizabeth Miller, who is our stage management professor, who works very closely with her students to make sure that they're getting what they need. And we do a lot of communicating to make sure that schedules are ready, calendars are ready, going into the rehearsal process and the tech process to make sure that things are as smooth as they can be. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're bumpy, but we still get through it. So I work very closely with the 3 hosts outside of this podcast, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, we're grateful to have you. You're a blast to work with, and
Pew pew pew.
Pew, pew, pew.
Get it? Like blast, like Star Wars
get it.
blaster. Blaster. Oh gosh, I can't talk.
Trevor. This is a podcast for children.
Y'all said don't worry about keeping it PG earlier. Make up your minds.
The only rule here is that it's never the same.
The only rule is to have fun, and then safety third.
That's right.
I blame somebody else if things go wrong.
Hey, I've established something, and we're going to stick with it.
So it seems like you have a lot of experience in theater in like so many different ways. You've done some performance, some design, some technical direction. Do you have like a favorite thing that you do? Do you really like being in musicals? Do you really like being a technical director? You've had some directing experience and then gameplay story if you want to talk about any of your experience with that production that's coming out soon.
Yeah. I don't know if I could pick one favorite. It always kind of depends on the show itself. I mean, I did listen to a lot of musicals growing up, so musicals are like part of my upbringing. But I also know that musicals aren't for everybody. So there are certain musicals that I still like listening to. Like I'll listen to musicals in the car. But I don't know if I enjoy working on, like, it depends on the capacity of the role that I'm working on too. Musicals have a tendency to require a lot more work for a technical director. I guess it depends on the musical.
What's your favorite musical? I'm just going to take us on a tiny tangent. Like you have them in your car. Like, what are you singing out loud, windows down?
Well, again, it's a complicated question because my favorite musical overall is not my favorite musical to sing to. My favorite musical overall is a show called Children of Eden, which is not a popular mainstream musical, but it's a show. It's actually the last full length show that my brother and I were in together. I think that'd be part of the reason why it's a kind of a nostalgic show. But it's for those who don't know, Children of Eden. It's the first act basically follows. It's very much an artistic interpretation of Adam and Eve and the apple, and then the second half follows Noah and the ark and the flood, and like the same actor who plays Adam also plays Noah. But it's just a show that it's about family and community, and it's a show that's really, really close to me. So if I had to pick like a favorite musical, it'd probably be that one. But I don't know, certain songs that are like in my range I like singing along to in the car. And that comes from all different kinds of shows. Yesterday, I was on a long drive and I ended up listening to Guys and Dolls because Guys and Dolls is one of my wife's special shows because that was her senior show as a stage manager. So it's a complicated question to ask about which musical is my favorite. But as far as like my favorite aspect of theater, I enjoy teaching. So in whatever capacity I can be teaching, I do that. And I've told myself a few years ago, and maybe it still holds true, that if I can be in a place where there's opportunity for me to kind of do a little bit of everything as far as designing, technical directing, teaching, and performing, and maybe a little bit of directing and a little bit of writing, then that is something that I could be happy at. I directed a musical called Blood Brothers, and I enjoyed it, but I don't know, and it was at my summer community theater that was based out of my high school. I don't know if I'd ever direct anything bigger than that. And then in undergrad, I was part of a student organization that I would do. Everyone kind of encouraged to try a little bit of everything. So it was a 24-hour theater festival called Insomnia Theater. So I did a little bit of writing with that and a little bit of directing and performing. And most recently on GPS, shameless plug for an upcoming Department of Theater show, I've been writing, designing, teaching, and building. The only thing that's missing is acting. And I think if I wanted to audition, I could have, but I don't know if I would have had time. Like I'm already struggling to find time to be writing and designing and being a TD, but we're making it work. So I don't know if I could pick one. It just always kind of depends on the circumstances of the show, of which aspect I like the most.
Do you have a favorite show as an actor?
I enjoy Shakespeare. I enjoy Arthur Miller and Tennessee Williams. And when I was an undergrad, I had an opportunity to be in both Macbeth and The Crucible. So those were the two main stage shows I did at Temple, and I really enjoyed being on both of them. I think that'd probably be a favorite play as an actor. I mean, everyone has their dream roles too, but I also like as somebody who has acting experience and designing experience and technical direction experience, I have like I don't know if I could, so don't ask me, I don't know if I could name them all, but somewhere there's a list of shows that I know I want to design someday, or shows I'm like really interested in being a technical director for, or if I get a chance to perform in them, then I'll be a performer.
Can you name any of them? I'm not asking for a full list, but
Titanic, the musical, as a performance-based show, and maybe even a design or a technical show. I think that if I were to kind of list them all, they would probably all be musicals, but maybe not as a TD. So I love Titanic. Ragtime is such a fantastic show, and any opportunity to be involved in that production would be awesome. And a lot of the shows that have become dream shows for me is because I've worked on them. I was at Tuacahn one summer, and we did Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Hunchback as a musical has become one of my favorites for sure. Shrek as a performer, but not as a technical director or as a designer, because it's so big.
Do you want to be Shrek?
I would love to be Shrek. Shrek definitely has a couple of songs that I sing in the car. Jekyll and Hyde is one of those shows that I love almost everything about it, so I would love to design. And I have designed a theorized set for it, but never in real scale. Actually, and I've been in Jekyll and Hyde as a summer show. I feel like I could ramble on with shows and lists and be on all kinds of tangents, and I don't think we have that kind of time.
I saw the coolest production of Jekyll and Hyde by New York City Deaf Theater. So it was an all-deaf production.
Oh,
all
that
deaf
sounds
cast.
awesome.
Oh, it was so cool. It was so cool.
That sounds great.
You said on multiple occasions now that as a TD, you want to avoid musicals.
It depends. I mean, we were supposed to do Godspell before COVID hit, and I was really, really excited about Godspell. Even though the set was, in a lot of ways, would have presented some interesting challenges, a show like Godspell that's meant to be minimal or stylized, I don't want to say that minimalism is the best thing, because it's not. But I was a carpenter on Guys and Dolls at Utah Shakes, and there was a lot of moving pieces. Not just physical set pieces moving around, but as a carpenter, like low on the totem pole, I was getting stressed about getting stuff done because I could see what the rest of the scenic team was going through, because it is just one of those shows that requires so much. And I know that I gravitate more towards the style of having a unit set that is stylized and interesting than having a bunch of moving pieces come on and off. So if you have a musical that has something that is stylized in such a way that it is more minimal, not because I'm lazy, but just because I gravitate more towards that visually. I had two set design professors in grad school. One loved the big shows that had so much happening at once, but then the other one gravitate more towards minimalism, but there were more unique challenges in building those set pieces. I would rather have a unique challenge that I can spend more time thinking about than being like, okay, I got to build all these individual pieces that are all really straightforward, but there's a lot of them. So it depends. It depends on the circumstances surrounding the show, production needs and requirements.
Something you touched on during the pre-interview was your feelings toward first dress.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you on that. That's one of my favorite parts of theater too. So I'd like to have you touch on that.
Sure. And it's because we were talking about the different aspects for sure, but I think a moment that happens with every single show, unless it's a virtual show, but even then we're working through all that. But in a standard season, when you have your standard process, I mean, no project is standard because it's all unique, and that's what makes it really cool. But almost always you have the moment of the first dress rehearsal. Leading up until that point, you've had the actors, you've had the director and the stage manager, but you've also started integrating props, and you've integrated lights and sound and scenery. But it isn't until first dress that you start to incorporate costumes and sometimes hair and makeup that becomes my favorite moment generally in the process. Ultimately, the final piece of that puzzle when you're doing a play is the audience. And of course, that's who the show is for. But the process always is more about the team that brought it together for me than it is about the audience. The audience's opinion and the audience's involvement is obviously very, very important. But when you see all the pieces of the puzzle that have been working on it for weeks or months, in some cases years, I've never worked on a show that's lasted years. But when you see all those pieces come together for the first time in front of you, it's really exciting. Sometimes by that time, everyone's really burned out and ready to just get the show open and done. But it does give me final dress to sometimes give me that extra boost of this is why we're doing it. And sometimes it happens a little earlier in the tech process. If there's a special scenic or lighting element that I get reminded through the stress and the headache, this is why we're doing this show. I can share a story in that regard. I was working on a production of Big Fish in graduate school, and another big show that I would love to do again in a different capacity or in the same capacity. But there's this moment in the show where a field of daffodils is supposed to appear and the lead is supposed to propose to the woman he's supposed to marry. Um, and the director wanted this really special moment where we would have confetti coming from the ceiling in colors of daffodils as this magical moment, because we didn't have enough money to buy a field of daffodils, and we didn't want to have it only be projections, even though we were doing a lot of projections in that show. And thinking about the confetti, my wife was the prop master for that show, and she went through so much trouble trying to find the right kind of confetti, the right color of confetti, making sure that it was flame retardant because it was coming from near lighting, and then building the snow cradle basically to do that. It was such a headache, but when it happened for the first time and we saw it in real time, I was that moment for me was like
Mhm.
the headache was worth it. The struggles were worth it. The time that we put into this, the money that we had put into it was worth it. And that often most happens around first dress.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love it when you have this you have all those conversations leading up to that complicated moment, right? You can all like picture it, but then when it actually happens and the magic is there, you're like, oh, that's better than I ever imagined, right? That magical instant.
hmm Especially in rehearsal, like the audience doesn't know what's happening when you're doing a show, but everyone who's been working on it knows. So even like right before that moment, there's that like bated breath of everyone being like, it's about to happen, and like the energy from the whole production
Yeah.
team and the cast like just rises. You could feel it in the rehearsals that you don't get with the audience, because like the surprise is there, which is a completely different feeling than like the anticipation.
Yeah.
And the audience has less of an awareness of what it took to get to that point.
Yes. hmm
It's really cool when you can see an idea that you were in the room to hear like get birthed like into that
Mhm.
moment when it actually happens. That's
Mhm.
so cool. So what goals do you still have for your career? We've talked about all of these musicals you'd love to work on in some capacity or another. With your teaching and designing here, what do you have on your horizon?
Well, like I mentioned, I really enjoy kind of those four main things between designing, teaching, tech building, doing technical direction work, and acting. But I also, when I was in graduate school, what in a lot of instances brought me the most joy was that I would be a TA for my set design classes and work with the undergraduate students and just kind of bounce ideas around when it came to their designs. So I really enjoy teaching design. I get a little bit of a chance to do that here as the technical director because I'm working with the set designer students to help inform their design process as a technical director. But really working with design students is something that I really, really enjoy a lot. And I think that the eventual career goal for me is to be teaching set design while also having the ability to go like, hey, can I come into the shop and build? I miss building and working with my hands. And having that kind of opportunity to do that, I think is the eventual theater goal for me. But along the way, I am very much kind of a go with the I like to think at least that I can be very go with the flow. And I really, really enjoy being a technical director as well and teaching technical direction. And I love how the two work with each other as far as set design and technical direction is concerned. The more you know as a technical director when working on a set design, the more informed you can be, and vice versa. Sometimes you might find that a technician may not have as much of a wherewithal for the art, and therefore they may just cut corners. But sometimes the set designer will have all these ideas for artistic vision and for a way to help visually tell the story, but aren't fully aware of how it can be implemented. And sometimes it's not the set designer's job to know that, but sometimes when you do have that information, it can inform your process and allow for a more seamless transition from design into implementation.
Mhm.
I've worked with a couple designers who I feel like don't even know what the laws of physics are sometimes.
That
Yeah.
does occasionally happen, for sure.
But I mean, to be fair, you get really good results from that as well. They present you with this challenge, like you were saying before, this unique challenge. And it's like, okay, how do we accomplish that? And then when you do, it's like, A, cool, we had no idea how to do this, and now we've done it. And B, the results are always beautiful. I just keep telling myself, this will be beautiful and it'll be wonderful when it's done. But right now,
Yeah.
I am not a fan, right? Like
What about Blythe Spirit? What?
foam. If we never use foam in the scene shop again, I will be a very happy individual.
I also know that as a TD, I don't like working with foam. But if I'm a designer and foam is an option, Yeah, it's one it's one of those lines that I have a foot on both sides of the line, if that makes sense.
You just missed this. What did we just do?
Midsummer.
Not Blythe. Yes.
I've
Right?
heard stories.
Whole set was made out of foam. And again, beautiful when it was done. But to build it was it was a thing. But a lot of foam, a lot of hot knives, it was an event, man. But when it was done, and I knew it would be, it was beautiful. I was very happy with the result. It was just it was the journey to get there that was fun, shall we say.
My first day at Lehigh, the technical director handed me a chainsaw and told me to go carve foam on the dock with Matt. And I was like, not dressed to really work in the shop because it was my first day. And I was like, I'm going to meet everyone and I'm going to have this thing. And I brought a change of clothes, but like literally put a chainsaw in my hand and was like, yeah, we're having trouble making this hill look right. Thanks. And I was like, okay. Hi, I'm Bailey. I have this chainsaw. Nice to meet you. Like,
hey, Bailey, I see you're holding that chainsaw.
I have never used a chainsaw to carve foam.
I don't recommend it.
Oh man, we used a handsaw. We used a chainsaw. We were doing everything. It was no.
My big foam show in grad school, what I mentioned already, was Big Fish, and
Big foam.
we had these 6, and the final product worked really, really well, but we had these 6 trees that were 8 feet wide, 25 feet tall, built-in pieces with steel frames. I didn't have to do any of the carving myself because I'm like, okay, we have a paint and props class. They're going to go do that. And I'll work on the framing and the confetti cradle, the daffodil petals.
Yeah.
It wasn't confetti. It was daffodil petals. It was magic.
Speaking of physics and theater magic, so theater were to suddenly disappear into thin air. No theater existed anymore. Thanks, COVID. What would you be doing with your life
if theater didn't happen?
If theater was just gone forever, not an option.
Oh gosh. Well, I enjoy teaching, but I also really, really enjoy building. So I think that I would still be a craft. I would be doing some kind of craftsman related things. I hope one day to have enough money to have a forge during quarantine. I've watched a lot of Forged in Fire, and I would love to be able to do things like that. So I would be a blacksmith maybe. During quarantine, I also built a TV stand for my mom out of plywood, and it was this custom piece. So if I'm building stuff, I think I'll still be happy, even if it's not in a theatrical sense.
I think we just determined what you're going to be doing.
I was just going to say, there's a commune for the sitting ovation when it's not theater, and I will.
You'll run the commune Etsy shop.
Yeah, and Etsy is definitely something that I would be open to trying, especially if I find that I have more time. And yeah, I don't know if I ever will have more time, but if theater did go away, Etsy's a really cool thing.
If you ever get a forge, let me know.
Yeah, dude. I might need a second set of hands for if I end up building a giant battle axe. I might need somebody to open the forge, and we can.
I was gonna say,
let's do it, man.
You're so embedded in pop culture. You're a big Marvel fan, big Star Wars fan, big Game of Thrones fan. I feel like you could make replica props from these TV shows, and those are things that people spend a lot of money on. You can make a lot of money, and you love these things so much that I'm sure you know all the details of them.
Kinda.
So I think that would be a really great thing for you, especially with that Plinko board you made. That was cool.
I think once we're through COVID and I might have a little more time, maybe during the summers, because it's something even without theater that my wife and I are interested in giving a try. To be can we make stuff and then sell it somehow? Everyone's been yeah, you should open up an Etsy thing. I'm well, we need a workspace to do it, and we can't use our apartment right now. We can't use our parking lot, but eventually, when we have a space big enough.
Well, if you have the time, I might know someone who has the space.
Don't tempt me, Matt. I don't have the time. Don't make me think that I have the time.
Cheryl's the same way. She'll see these really nice bookshelves or TV stands, or we were walking down the street one day in Bethlehem and she was looking in a store. She's like, build me that. I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem. I'll get right on that with all my free time. I have another question here for you. Mm-hmm. So how does working in the arts change your perspective of art? When you go see a live show or in life in general, how does doing it and being in it change your everyday perspective?
Yeah. Well, going to shows, for example, it's kind of hard to remember what a live show was like before COVID. But going back to what I said earlier about my mom making sure I was always early for stuff, when you have a set going into a theater and the curtains are open and you're meant to look at the set, I will sit down. I won't open the program. I will look at the set. And I think that I did that being trained as a set designer in TD, but I would always just kind of sit and look at the set and the lights. And sometimes I'd look for little mistakes here and there, but I don't think it ruins the show for me. I just like, it gives me a sense of what the capabilities of the resources of that theater might be. So as far as going to see shows, maybe it does make me a bit of a critic, but I try to keep it separated because of the fact that like if I didn't work on that show, I have no place to judge because I'm not trained as a theater critic. I'm going to see the show as a person seeing the show. But I like being able to look at all of the pieces and not just watch the performers tell the story, because I know that the costumes are telling the story, the set's telling the story, the lights telling the story, the sound, like all the various areas that surround the show are telling the story in a certain capacity or another. So having that awareness overall, I think, helps me as an audience member, even though I notice when things are not the way they're supposed to be, which doesn't happen all that often. I like to think so. Or if things don't happen the way they're supposed to, then the stage manager hit it in such a way that even trained technical theater people don't notice it. So, as far as outside of theater, having an understanding of, a lot of times people see performance and production and design as two, and they are in a lot of ways two separate things. But having the ability to, and training to have a little bit of experience in both sides of production has made me more empathetic to the other side of it. Sometimes you'll have people who have only worked as technicians and who will be like, ugh, actors. But sometimes you'll have actors who are like, oh, these technicians have no idea what we do. And the truth is that they're both right and they're both wrong at the same time. So having understanding and empathy for both has helped me understand what both sides of the production need. And not just in theater, but in everyday life. Sometimes I like to think that I can be a really good mediator when it comes to things I might experience in my family, or between friends groups. I'm actually very fortunate that there isn't a lot of drama in my friends group. But sometimes, like my mom and brother might get into an argument, and they'll call and vent to me about it, and I'll be able to kind of be like, "Well, think about it from this perspective, think about it from that perspective." So I think that working in theater in general, but also having, what's the word, a variety in my experiences and in my practices, even though I still want to acknowledge, like, I don't know everything. I'm still very early in my career, but having a basic understanding of performance, a basic understanding of directing, having basic understandings of some and maybe a little bit more advanced understandings of others has made me more empathetic, both in my theater life and in my personal life.
I can agree with that. With this GPS thing we're doing, we're all kind of wearing these new hats and doing these new things. As an ATD, I hear conversations that happen with directors, and they're like, "Oh, I really want this, I really want that," and there are just times I'm like, "Hey, no, there's not time. Do you really need that?" And like now I'm directing a room in GPS, and I just want everything. I'm like, I want that, I want this, I want the lights to go out, right? I'm making everyone's job 10 times harder than it has to be. And I was like, oh, I get it. But it's exciting to like have that have the vision and want to try and play with all these different things. And what you need is someone to sit down and say, like, listen, I know there's a lot to do here, but think let's what's reasonable, what's going to happen. Do we have the time? Do we have the resources? So GPS has made me so much more empathetic with like a director, because I'm always like, why do they want that? Just no. And I get it. I understand.
Yeah.
I see that you build your own furniture, and I'm wondering, like, what does that entail, and what are other ways that arts have impacted your life? I mean, building your own furniture is pretty cool.
I'm trying to think of the things that I've built. I built a TV stand for my mom. Recently built a coffee table with my wife. I keep on referring to her as my wife. I can just say her name is Robin. She's wonderful. She's awesome. And there was actually another thing that I built that had to do with the way I proposed to her. So those are the kind of the three big things that I've built. Big things. I don't even want to call it. But my wife and I met in theater.
We're not there yet, Trevor.
Oh, I know. I'm looking at the bullet points and I'm like, oh, that. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read, but I'm also looking at you. So we'll back it up a little bit.
We shared this document with you for a reason.
No, it's just maybe I need to make the font bigger because I'm like twice as big. There we go. Okay. So build my own furniture. Elizabeth, do we want to like cut this part out and start the question again?
If you could just read each bullet point first, that would be. If you could oh, well done.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's my new beatbox skills. Trevor, tell me some ways being involved in the arts has impacted other areas of your life.
There are a lot of ways outside of within theater, but also outside of theater, how the art form has affected my life. Especially recently with COVID, I'm finding that I'm doing a lot more to kind of like my work-life balance is a little out of whack right now. But I'm also really fortunate that I have a wife who also does theater and understands that it is more demanding than a lot more people expect. That's something that I'm working towards and something that I had a little bit of, but then COVID was kind of like, nah. When COVID first hit, I had a lot more life and less work. But now that it's kind of it's balancing out because we're like trying to catch up a little bit. On the one hand, my work life balance has, in certain capacities, has affected my relationship, but in also with capacities could be a lot worse because if she didn't have an understanding of theater, she wouldn't necessarily understand the time that it takes. And especially we've talked about GPS a little bit already. With me doing so many things with GPS outside of my typical technical direction and production management role, it's taking a lot of time outside of what my regular work time would be. I'm hoping that once this semester and then these current shows are kind of opened and successful and then struck, that I'll be able to get some of that work-life balance back and be able to find ways to maintain that, because it is something that it is easy to, if you're in this art form, it's easy to get away from. And thinking back to the first XYZ episode, I'm really wanting to take a lot of those pieces of advice that the three of you and David Holcomb have had about being your own worst critic and managing your self expectations. So that's something that, and I mean, it's a lesson to be learned. I wouldn't say that I'm mad at theater for making my work life balance be like crap, because it's not like crap. It's just there are certain times, there are moments that I'm like, yeah, I'm working a lot more than I should right now. But sometimes it is the demands of the show, and it kind of I know it'll eventually work itself out.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take some work, right? We're going to have to redesign
Culture
how we
shift.
approach what we do.
Mhm.
And yeah, culture shift. Thank you, Bailey. We should start those conversations and start building that idea so that when we come back full steam in the fall, we can achieve that balance that we seek.
For sure. You're talking about culture shifting, but like the community that surrounds it,
Mhm.
like theater people work really, really hard. And I've definitely found a good sense of community being involved in theater. Everyone a lot of times everyone just wants the success of the project, even if sometimes drama or a miscommunication gets in the way, there is a great sense of community. And I know that I've been fortunate to have a lot of friends who also do theater. In some cases, really long lasting friends. Some of my closest friends are people who did theater in high school with me, but they don't necessarily do it as much now. But they also are there trying to remind me about, like, you're working this weekend? And I'm like, yeah, it's tech. I'm like, well, do you need to work as much time as you do? And I'm like, well, you did theater, you get it. I'm like, yeah, I get it, but it's also about, like you're saying, kind
Yeah.
of talking about the community, but also the culture and changing the culture to make sure that the work life balance is there.
I have a question for you. So your brother also works in
Uh huh.
theater, in the industry. Do you think the fact that you both work in the same industry has like strengthened your bond as brothers, or like do you think your relationship with your brother would be different if you didn't work in the same industry?
I think that we're closer because of it.
Mhm.
If I had decided to not go into theater and I would be hearing about the struggles he has as a working actor, I would be like, well, just don't do it. But I also know that sometimes it's something that's in you and you can't get out.
It seems frivolous to outsiders sometimes complaining about like theater problems,
No, but
even though it's like a huge industry and career, but people think because it's like pretending for a living that like the problems aren't
right.
real.
But like
Yeah.
we've always been as supportive of each other as we could, going to see each other's shows. At least he couldn't come to Utah, but like recently when he was in shows, I would go see them, or he would be able to come see shows here. I think that in certain capacities, we have a greater understanding than someone who wouldn't be in the industry, but he also does more performance based stuff, and I do currently more technical and design stuff. And there is some of that disconnect that we try to like understand each other more. I just think that we are trying to always be as supportive of each other as we can.
My brother and I both work in the arts, but like in very different. He does like fine arts, and I do this, so we butt heads a lot actually about it. But we've always had kind of a combative relationship. Like we could talk about art a lot, but he's like, my type of art is harder, and I'm like, no, my type of art is harder. Not that they're both not hard, but we're just siblings that fight. So
Yeah. No, we're actually like we never really were two siblings to really fight that much. I don't think. I mean, if he listens to this and says, "Trevor, you're completely wrong," then he'll tell me. But we do have a lot of things in common outside of theater too. Like whenever we watch an episode of WandaVision, we would be on the phone with each other and talking about theories for how that would all come together. So we do have a lot of the same nerd fandoms in common as well.
yeah, my brother's just like a more heightened version of me. So it's like every personality trait I have just like pushed to the extreme a little more. If that gives you any insight into who he is.
Hard to imagine. No, I'm just kidding.
I know. I would like to hear some good theater stories you have, and I would like to hear with this adorable mushy story that I love, because I love, about how you met your wife, how you asked her to be your girlfriend, and how you proposed.
I don't know if we have the time for the full version of that story, but I can.
Give
I'll give a.
give a rundown.
I'll give a rundown. So I was assigned to be the prop master for a show called Rabbit Hole while I was in graduate school. Coming into the first production meeting, I knew almost everyone in the room except for this one girl at the other end of the table, who had just added theater as a major and decided to sign on to the show as an assistant stage manager. And I was intrigued and being like, "Who is that? I don't know who that is." And I don't know if it's because like there was an attraction or it's because I didn't know who she was and I knew everyone else. Probably both. Throughout the rehearsal process, we were working a lot with each other just because I was bringing rehearsal props to her and then final props. And there was this moment with the lighting designer, not even a moment, but there was the lighting designer who was another a great friend of ours, had a vision for this lampshade that would project these stars on the wall in the kids' room. I had done a lot of struggling with making a glass lampshade and spray painting it and then putting stamps on it. And we ended up having to change it pretty drastically at the last minute because it just wasn't working. So we ended up finding a different lampshade. And I was working relatively late, and Robin comes in and sees, like, coming from rehearsal, that I'm working on this. And she's like, "Can I help you with this?" Throughout the process, she was telling me that she's interested in learning about props. Um, and there was definitely some truth to it, but find out later that she was interested in more than learning about props. I end up having her work with me on this lampshade in the theater. And I was like, "Hey, I've never been up to the catwalks. You want to go to the catwalks?" And she's like, "Sure." And it was kind of cool being up there. And there was like maybe a moment, but I'm like, maybe this isn't it. So it ended up not being it. Um, and we just kind of worked on the lampshade and finished the lampshade. And she was really, really helpful in that regard. And she had been helpful throughout the whole process, learning more because she was interested in props. And she still is. That's kind of one of her things that she likes doing now is propping and painting and now some costuming as well.
I'm going to interrupt your story really quick. I'm convinced that Robin actually isn't interested in props, and this is just a long con. She just used the props to like get close to Trevor, but now it's too deep in her story to admit that she can't do it. Robin's gonna hear this and be like, "Bailey, what are you talking about? I do like props." Like,
because I think that she's done too much good work as a prop master for it to be.
It's the long con, Trevor.
Maybe I don't know. If she listens and then she's like, "You got me," then I'll tell you. That lampshade ended up being the one in the show and ended up working out really, really well, and had a great effect. And then the following show was Bonnie and Clyde, where she was like, I don't want to work on stage management. I want to do assistant props, because I was also assigned as a prop master and the assistant set designer.
The long con.
He's going to hear this and finally breathe that sigh of relief. Like, oh, I can relax now.
One of the props that was needed for the show was something that like required lettering. So I think the day before final dress, the day before opening, it was the day before opening. It was final dress.
That magic moment.
I had like spelled out the props on the piano to say, "Will you be my girlfriend?" or something like that. Or it was like, I don't know if there were that many letters. It might have just been like girlfriend ? I can't remember the specific details of that. But then she was like, "Yes, girlfriend." And then the following summer, we had the same like prop master and assistant prop master relationship, and it almost killed us. Like, it almost ended our relationship because there was, like since then, we've worked on the same shows together, but never that closely.
Yeah.
Um, she
Yeah.
ended up doing the brunt of the work anyway, and I was just there doing meetings. Ended up using the lampshade from Rabbit Hole to eventually propose to her in the same theater that I asked her to be my girlfriend.
So cute.
Obviously, she said yes because we're married now, right?
And he still has the lampshade, and we're gonna ask him to take a picture of it to use as marketing material because that's just so cute.
I was just writing that down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was technically property
Oh, perfect.
of the department, but I definitely took it, and I'm like, nah, this is gonna be in our house now.
Does she know that she married a thief?
Oh yeah, well,
Nobody takes anything from theater.
Just ask Becky.
Right? If you listen to our episode.
oh
And
yeah,
our commune is actually just a museum of stolen goods, apparently, from shows.
it's a room of requirement.
Yeah. And I would like to hear another story. As cute as that was, you told us a great story about the rush of being
On Crew.
on Crew, and then I also want to hear about the Peter Pan story.
Okay.
The Jolly Roger story.
One of the classes I teach here is Backstage Crew. The funny thing about Backstage Crew, in general, not the class, but that whenever I was given an opportunity to work on a crew as a student, I was always like, no, I'd rather work in the shop. I've never been officially a member of a run crew. I've only been a substitute crew member. So the rush that I get, it was something I hadn't experienced since I was a performer, but I had gotten a bit of a rush subbing in for a student when we did Smart People. I'm like, okay, this set change is coming. I'm bringing on this hospital gurney. I'm watching the cue light. I'm ready to go. And I had this rush of like doing the set change. And I'm like, and I hadn't gotten that kind of rush because I had never been in like real time. It was always like, I'm preparing the set for the rehearsal. I'm preparing the set for the show. But being involved in the show, the running of the show itself was a really, really cool experience because it gave me a different type of emotional experience that I hadn't experienced. How many times can I say the word experience in one sentence?
Keep
My
going.
God. And the other time that I was a substitute crew member was at Tuacon, the same summer I referenced Hunchback earlier in the episode, was a summer we were doing Peter Pan. And some of the crew members had given conflicts way at the beginning of the season, and they hired me as a carpenter, and like, you're also going to be a substitute crew member for a couple of nights. So I learned a couple of crew members' tracks. And at this theater, it was an outdoor amphitheater, and we had these huge set pieces, all built with steel framing, all meant to roll and then be covered with plywood. Actually, we didn't even use Luan because Luan was too flimsy. We had to build everything out of plywood. So the set pieces were heavy. And I had this one moment for Peter Pan that I was supposed to open an arm, basically, of the rail of the Jolly Roger, and then lock it into place. And I forgot to lock it in place, but there wasn't enough time for us to run off stage because the stage was so big. So the crew member had to like crouch or lay down behind the set while the scene and the musical numbers happened, while the pirates were jumping around on the Jolly Roger. So I had forgotten to take this sidearm, basically. I'm using visuals, but no one can see it. So but it was basically this maybe 12-foot long railing of a ship that was on casters, but I didn't lock it down. But I knew that my forearm was big enough to fit underneath it and not be injured and I used my forearm as a wedge to keep the set from rolling back while the actors were on the stage. So I definitely felt people moving on it, and I felt it like compressing, but not like squeezing. But I was like kind of holding onto it with my arm and my hand as close as I could while I was laying on my back, making sure that the audience couldn't see me.
This is the danger of the show must go on mentality, Trevor.
Yeah, that is true. But it was also a safety concern though. Like if that set piece had rolled and a crew member and a cast member had like done some kind of choreography and it wasn't in the right place, they could have gotten injured. So that's why I was like, and the arm was also blocking me from being seen. So you're definitely right about the show must go on mentality. And I hear both sides of the thought of that argument.
Hey, Matt.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Can you stand by with dramatic piano, please?
Stand by.
Dramatic piano, go. So, Trevor, I'd like to know, how do you want to impact the world? What legacy do you want to leave behind?
Oh my goodness. I have a tendency to do things on the fly. The piano is definitely informing my tone.
It has that power.
As far as legacy, like a theatrical legacy is not something that I think about. If I'm being completely honest, I enjoy the work in the moment. I try to. I mean, I don't necessarily not want to. Like if this happens, it happens, but it's not necessarily a goal of mine to. I don't know. I kind of want to start the question over. The legacy I want to leave behind doesn't have much to do with theater, but it has much to do with my own family.
Mhm.
And that's
Okay.
perfectly fine. It doesn't have
Okay.
to be theater related. It would be all about
Well,
Trevor.
I think the legacy I want to leave behind is through my kids. Um,
Mhm.
I don't have any children yet, but one thing that I knew before I was going to do theater back in my senior year of high school was that I was born to be a father. So I look forward to that time that I'm going to have being a dad, even though I know it's going to be very challenging, more challenging than I anticipate at this point. I know out of the four of us, only one of us is a parent, but I think that that's more of a legacy that I want to leave. And I definitely want to leave the world better than I found it. I don't have specific goals as to how, other than like all the things I can do as an individual, as far as things, making sure I recycle. Um, and making sure that I'm teaching lessons to both my kids and I guess to students about collaboration and about teamwork and communication, not just about like building scenery, but like, what it's like to be part of a group of people who are working towards a common goal and making sure that people know that working together, I mean, it sounds like a very cliche thing to say, but working together is the best way to get things accomplished.
I think that's great. I don't think legacies need to be these like big, giant, I think it's okay to be impactful in the small ways too.
Mhm. This is the eye of the hurricane. This is the only way I can protect my legacy. I don't sing along with Hamilton because my mouth does not move that fast. In case we hadn't learned in this episode with me and my stumbling over my words and my diction, which hopefully isn't too much of a problem. Sorry in advance.
If I can do it.
If we can edit Matt, we can edit anyone.
Right. If I can sing the tangent, you don't have to worry about anything. So we'll probably let's see if this is any different. Did you know that we have a global following, Trevor?
I did know that. I know that we have listeners in all continents except for like Antarctica, maybe, or Africa. I know that Asia and Europe, there are people who are listening everywhere.
And I think South America.
Yeah, Brazil. Whoever's in Brazil,
Yeah,
thanks.
definitely. Yeah.
This is a shout out to you guys.
Our global audience.
Our global audience. Is there anything you'd like to say to the global audience that you haven't already said?
Tired of hearing it, but wear a freaking mask. Get your vaccines. I know I haven't been doing my due diligence to like call and schedule an appointment for myself, but I know that
We're not in that phase yet.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
We're still in 1A.
I haven't gotten
well,
notice
then never
yet.
mind. I feel less bad, but still, get your vaccines, wear your masks, wear sunscreen.
Take care of yourself.
Recycle.
Don't be an asshole.
There it is.
Think about other people, and even not just with COVID, but like
Yeah.
so much recently. I'm like I drive home from work and I just see people who are only thinking about them, and sometimes I'm definitely that person. But like, be aware of your That's a good shop lesson. Be aware of your surroundings. When people are using the table saw, make sure you're wearing hearing protection. If people are lifting up a piece of scenery, make sure that you're aware.
You're either helping or you're not in the way.
Oh yeah, help or yeah. Situational awareness, not just in theater, but in your life.
In life, when you're driving down the highway.
Practice empathy, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
that is.
I've definitely done that, because I'll do the same thing. Like I'll be the asshole in the car who's like "Brr," all over, right? And then there are times I'm like I'm not in that headspace, and I'm like, look at this asshole. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
usually me. So in both regards, I try to temper that. Right? I'm like, I can't get too mad at him because I'm usually him, and when I am him, I try not to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, here we go. Everybody
I'm
ready?
trying to think if I have any other advice. Or maybe not. Maybe I should.
I'm cutting you off. This is that
It's the
Tony.
hook.
This is the walk-off music, right?
Yeah, this is our hook.
If there is anything, this is your
Too late.
chance.
You turn the music. Shut up. I'm waiting for you to give your last little blurb.
That's cool, man. I'm gonna edit all this out later anyway.
You say that, but how many episodes? We're like, we'll cut this in post and then
Matt, you're killing me right now.
Okay, here we go. Ready? Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you, Trevor, for being our special guest. And thank you to Lehigh University Department of Theater for sponsoring this podcast.
Make sure you're following us on social media to play fun trivia games about past episodes, get a sneak peek behind the scenes, and to be alerted when new episodes are coming out.
Follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search LU Theater, that's theater ending with an R-E, LU Theater Podcast Series, and on YouTube. All of our past episodes are available on the Lehigh University Department of Theater channel. Catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, now I need to run off.
Here.
This is the dance party, Trevor. You gotta
wait.
join us.
I thought that.
You
I
thought
don't
what?
know. I thought that there was. Like, I guess we have the virtual backgrounds for a reason. But there's no. Is this stuff that goes to promo?
Maybe. There was a point when we were using the video for promo. I don't know that we always do anymore, but it's an option.
Yeah, Juliana's practicing.
Is
on
she?
it.
Is she? Good. So, for real though, Trevor, I will want a picture of that.
Yeah.